and in awe of all the young people, all the kids here who are making a difference. The adults in our country, the politicians, have let everyone down. What we have witnessed for 2 years in Gaza is a genocide on our TV screens and on our telephones. And our government, a Labour government, has been sending arms to the Israeli government that have been killing Palestinians, disproportionately women and children. And that has happened in our country with the support of our government. And what I've seen through all the London marches, all the events I've done all over the country, is that the people in this country, the British public, completely disagree with this government and the previous Tory government, that we do not allow genocide to happen in our name. And I'm so proud to be with you here today to take part in the sponsored walk that you're doing, because you are going to change this country forever. You are showing politicians that they are out of touch, that you do not support genocide, you do not support austerity when it shuts down community centres, when it makes it very difficult to get a GP appointment. And I'm really just honoured to be here with you. We will continue to march for Palestine. We will continue to boycott. We will continue to divest. We will continue to hold politicians to account, whether that's Keir Starmer, Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump. All of them have to be held to account for the crimes that they have committed, and we will make sure that justice is upheld. I will continue to do that, and thank you so much for having me here today. We have a government that is trying to criminalise not just dissent, but all Palestinian solidarity, including marches. They have banned a non-violent direct action group for the first time in British history. What we are seeing is authoritarianism trying to smear our cause, the Palestinian cause, and to trample on all of our civil liberties. We have to stand up against this. We have to stand up to what the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is doing and what this Labour government is doing. And as many of you will know, I was elected as a Labour MP, and I really tried my best to stop them from continuing their complicity with genocide, highlighting our arms sales, highlighting surveillance that we are providing to the Israeli army that is conducting genocidal operations in Gaza, and for month on month highlighting the desperation that we see around humanitarian aid not getting in and the illegal siege. This is a government that has welcomed Israeli war criminals with the red carpet. This is a government that continues to provide arms. So what I see here today is a community that is telling this government, not in our name, not now, not ever, and it's these kids that show the rest of the adults what the future looks like, and these are kids that are going to make a real difference. I'm so honoured and inspired to have walked with you. Thank you so much, and we must continue. We know that a ceasefire has not led to any material change. Bombs are still falling on Gaza, there is not enough aid in Gaza, and we know that a ceasefire does not mean peace. It does not mean an end to military occupation. It does not mean an end to apartheid. It does not mean an end to an illegal siege. So we must continue marching, we must continue boycotting, we must continue divesting, we must continue raising our voice. And from my perspective and the new party that I'm co-leading with Jeremy, we are uncompromising in our solidarity with the Palestinian people, and that means we must expel the Israeli ambassador, we must shut down the Israeli embassy, because you cannot have normal relations with a genocidal state. So we have to be uncompromising in our anti-Zionism, because Zionism is a racist, supremacist ideology, and we stand up to racism in this country, and we stand up to racism in any part of the world. So thank you so much for having me. These kids are absolutely incredible. You are a credit to your parents and to your community, and you will show us the way forward. Thank you so much.
Wearing bright yellow in case you missed me. I want to firstly thank the organisers for all the events that I've taken part in today, the children-sponsored walk for Gaza, the march that we just did with PACE, and this meeting, because, believe it or not, I don't like to talk that much. I know you're like, she's chatting shit, but genuinely, I'm more interested in the Q&A bit of this conversation because I want to listen to you. But before we get to that, I do have to do some more talking, so please forgive me for that. I want to start off by telling you about how I got here. And I'm not going to start off with the story in 1993, don't worry. I'm going to start off in 2003. and that was the Iraq War. And 1 million people marching, coaches from Huddersfield, from Coventry, from Birmingham, from all over the country going to London. 1 million people contacting their MPs, taking part in our democracy, trying to stop this country, this Labour government at the time, from following the US as the US's poodle into an illegal war. And those people were ignored, and this country took part in an illegal war, and we see the ramifications of that across the Middle East today. And what that showed many of us across the country is that if you see something that's wrong and you oppose it and you organise and 1 million people march, your government can still turn around and ignore you. So do we really live in a democracy? And that was me around 9 years old. I then grew up in inner city Birmingham. Birmingham, that's quite popular at the moment. Robert Jenrick tells you he doesn't see any white faces in Handsworth. I grew up right next to Handsworth in the most diverse community, working class community, from people from all backgrounds who support each other, who defend each other, and people like Robert Jenrick are not welcome in our communities, and they should never come again because their hatred and their division is unwelcome. It's the same Birmingham that Keir Starmer is now probably going to allow racist, Zionist, supremacist football hooligans to be able to come to also cause trouble with Maccabi Tel Aviv and the match at Aston Villa. When they come, we will also turn up and march against them because we do not allow hate and division in our cities and our towns, not now, not ever. So you might not be able to tell from my somewhat neutral-ish accent, I'm a Brummie. And I grew up seeing austerity decimate my community. I saw community centres shut down. I saw the libraries that I grew up studying in shut down. I saw teachers that are incredible and I wouldn't be here without them struggle. And what that showed me was that whether or not I engaged with politics, politics was engaging with me. And that was a profound reality when the coalition government tripled tuition fees. I went to university in 2012 and I was part of the first cohort of students to have to pay £9,000 tuition fees. These have obviously increased, and now you have generations of students saddled with student debt. And one of my proudest interventions in Parliament was presenting my student loan statement. I think I'm still the only MP to ever do that, and question Boris Johnson whether he thought it was fair for working class kids who wanted to pursue an education to be saddled with tens of thousands of pounds of student debt while he went from the playing fields of Eton to a free education at Oxford, and obviously wasn't able to answer that question. So my experience as a child, a Muslim child that grew up under the war on terror and then saw what the financial crisis meant to our communities, which was austerity, has shaped me profoundly. It is why I entered politics. But it's not the only reason, because I was really lucky to go to the occupied West Bank as an 18-year-old. I went with my dad. It was a delegation of Labour councillors and activists. And I didn't see myself as a privileged young person at the time. Growing up in inner city Birmingham, and you're defined by your postcode, you're defined by the area you grow up. And I often reflect on an anecdote where a police officer said every kid in my school would be able to tell him which gang they would end up in. This man never visited my school, he never spoke to any kids in my school, yet he stereotyped us and profiled us and said we would amount to nothing. So I didn't see myself as a person of privilege, and then I go to the occupied West Bank, and because of the passport I was born with, pure luck, pure lottery, I'm treated like a human being. I'm able to go through checkpoints where Palestinians are humiliated on a daily basis, where they are denied their freedom of movement to be able to access healthcare in Jerusalem if they're in Ramallah. I go to Hebron, I see Jewish-only roads. Palestinians can't walk on these roads that generations of their families have lived in. I go to Bethlehem, I see the same apartheid wall, and occupation and apartheid become real things. They're not just words, they are material consequences to those words. And I come back profoundly changed by this experience, and I join my Palestine Society on campus, I joined the Free Education Society on campus, and I joined the Black and Ethnic Minority Association on campus. And I guess I realised that there are so many people who see the world the way that I do, that there is injustice, and we use whatever mechanism, whatever lever we have to change that. And I found that in the student movement, and it was magical. That moment, that click, when you realise, oh my God, there's so many other people who think the same way that I do. I am not alone, and we're all fighting for this together. That is a profound realisation. And I was lucky to have it as a student, as I was organising around boycott, divestment and sanctions, around the prevent strategy, around mental health and the Black attainment gap, and various issues. So the student movement was where I saw solidarity in action, where we stand up for trans people, where we stand up for migrants, where we stand up for working class students, because our fight is the same fight. In liberation politics, we talk about the chains that we have being different, but we have to unshackle them all. And that's a key part of my politics, understanding that our oppressions might look different, but we've got to dismantle the whole system, because none of us are free until all of us are free. And at the same time, I'm a Labour Party card-carrying member, but it means absolutely nothing. I never went to a Labour Society on my campus in the whole time I was a student, because all they ever did was invite right-wing politicians, and I saw absolutely no point in wasting my time going to those events. Instead, I was involved in campaigns, and then Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader of the Labour Party, and many of us feel hope for the first time, and we know what happened there. So before I entered Parliament, I actually worked in retail. I worked in Primark and I worked in H&M, and I say that's where I got my thick skin from, because if you can survive Christmas sales working in Primark, Westminster is nothing compared to that. And then after that, I realised that young people are basically sold a lie. We're told by society, we're told by politicians, all you have to do is get good grades, all you have to do is go to university and everything's going to be sorted. Bullshit. I'm in a mosque, I need to be careful how I speak. That's the worst it's going to get. And after I graduated, got good grades, got a degree, where's this dream you promised me? Where's this graduate job? And going to the job centre, having to look at my CV constantly, even though I had loads of experience, the jobs were not there, the opportunities were not there, and it's only got worse. And so I take that experience with me in politics. I then worked in the third sector combating Islamophobia, but my best job, I would say, was working as a community organiser, because that took me from an activist to an organiser before I became a politician, because I understand that true power lies in our communities. And that's why this party that we're building isn't just an electoral project. It is one to build power in our communities, because that's where change truly comes from. Now, everyone in this room knows that we are living through incredibly difficult times, a critical moment in our politics and in our country, and that Labour Party we could all talk about for days has become truly unrecognisable. Under Keir Starmer, this is a party of corporate lobbyists and billionaire donors, a party that is so anti-socialist, it is stepping into McCarthyite territory. They won a huge majority on a record low voter share. And this election was defined by low turnout and even lower enthusiasm. So this is a government that already was quite unpopular. So what have they done with that power? They have refused to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which keeps hundreds of thousands of kids in avoidable poverty. They cut winter fuel payments for pensioners. They cut disability benefits. They watered down a workers' right package. They've attacked our civil liberties and labelled people of conscience as terrorists. These are the people that are trying to stop a genocide. They are heroes, and we salute their courage for standing up for all of us. I voted against every single one of those measures. I have zero regrets. I would do it again because it was the right thing to do. So this is a government that has turned cruelty into performance. We've seen deportation videos. used as propaganda, they've suspended family reunifications, and they've made endless concessions to hate. This is a Prime Minister who knowingly quoted Enoch Powell calling us an island of strangers, saying that migration has done incalculable damage. Shame on him, and shame on every single MP who went out and defended him, knowing exactly who he was speaking to and his intentions behind those phrases. We are not an island of strangers. We are an island that is suffering, and we're going to change that because we are going to fight back. And we've seen it. We've seen reform surging in the polls, and that isn't because they offer real answers. It's because the establishment has smeared and silenced the left while leaving millions to rot in a broken system. And the truth is, millions of people, or most people, are not turning to reform because they are hardened racists or fascists. These people, many of them, are disillusioned. They see a country that is failing them, and they feel like they have nowhere else to turn. And for too long, the left has simply not been on the pitch. Unlike reform, we actually have answers. We know what caused this crisis, and we know how to fix it. Millions of people are crying out for change. They simply have not believed in politicians, and they've stopped believing politics can deliver it. Our challenge and our task on the left is to convince them that it can, and that's why what we're building is a socialist left-wing grassroots member-led party, your party. And I've said this so many times, I'll say it again, billionaires already have at least 3 parties fighting for them. Isn't it about time the rest of us had one? And I didn't quit the Labour Party to create another Labour Party or a party less democratic than the Labour Party. I'd rather not waste my time, to be frank. So we're going to do things differently. The challenges facing the working class can't be met by a Labour 2.0 that mimics the party's structures or limits itself to pursuing reforms under capitalism. At best, you might get some temporary gains. You might be able to nationalise a few industries, but you cannot fix the crises of capitalism, of inequality, of exploitation, and ecological destruction that define the capitalist system. So we need full democratic control of the economy by workers, because the problem we know isn't just a few bad bosses or a few greedy companies. It is a system that is built for private profit, not social need. And as long as this system remains in place, it will reproduce all of these inequalities and exploitation. So we know that only socialism is the answer. That's what I want us to fight for in your party, and what your party should be fighting for too. So your party must be explicitly socialist, it must be unapologetically class-based, and it must also be fiercely anti-imperialist. Some people have said to me, why don't you just not bother and just join the Greens? And the answer to that is the Greens are not a socialist party, they are not class-based, and they are not anti-imperialist. And I've heard interviews where the Green leader wants to maintain diplomatic relations with Israel. And I really like Zach Polanski. We've spoken on a lot of panels together. But that to me is an absolute no. We cannot have diplomatic relations with a genocidal apartheid state. We must expel the Israeli ambassador. We must close down the embassy, and like I said before, we must treat Israel like the pariah state it is, just the same way South Africa was treated, because normal relations with genocide is unacceptable, full stop. And then also, that means withdrawing from NATO immediately. That is a fundamental difference. The Green Party's website says it recognises NATO has an important role in ensuring the ability of its member states to respond to threats to their security. Sorry, but you cannot greenwash NATO. NATO is an imperialist war machine, and that's why we must withdraw immediately. It is not about peace and security. It is about imperial power and projecting Western dominance, where only arms manufacturers profit from death and destruction. You can look at Iraq, you can look at Afghanistan, you can look at Libya. Endless wars that have made the world less safe. Global destabilization, expansion of militarism, trillions wasted on weapons while our public services crumbled. And the truth is, the biggest threats we all face today aren't military invasions, it's the rise of the far right, it is global pandemics, it is climate catastrophe and economic crises. And NATO cannot solve any of these. Instead, it swallows billions of pounds that should be going into our homes, our healthcare, and addressing the climate catastrophe. And we demand wages, not weapons. We demand welfare, not warfare. And so when members decide your party's policy on foreign policy, especially, it must be a policy that is rooted in cooperation, not militarism, in solidarity and not Western dominance, and therefore it must have an anti-Zionist position, because that is the socialist position, as well as withdrawing from NATO. And mass movement politics is at the heart of what we're building here. Of course, we are here to win elections, we are here to challenge state power, but a party that is only an electoral vehicle will vanish when the elections aren't there. And a party that ignores parliament will create a vacuum that the far right will fill. So we have to do both, build a movement and fight in elections. And that's why I think any successful left-wing party must be a campaigning, social movement orientated force combined with a robust parliamentary presence and winning councils up and down the country, where our MPs are on picket lines, outside embassies, at Palestine demonstrations, at anti-fascist mobilisations, and defending the rights of all marginalised people, trans people, migrants, the most vulnerable in our communities. Because if you only focus on parliament and if you neglect the movement, you might end up with a few isolated MPs under attack from the establishment, as we've seen before, and when they lose their seats or when they retire, the whole project collapses. And so we need the social infrastructure that sustains socialist politicians, supports them in office, and develops new leaders to replace them. We are not interested in jobs for life. That's why mandatory reselection has to be our policy. And so branches like the one in Huddersfield must be engines of local struggle, organising with tenants, with workers, with communities abandoned by this government. And public opinion is with us on so much already, against endless war and genocide, against profiteers looting our public services, for renationalisation, decent housing, properly funded healthcare and workers' rights. But our movement is fragmented, and one of our biggest tasks is to restore hope, to show people that real positive change is still possible. And that means us on the picket lines, us in tenants' meetings, standing with Palestine, opposing authoritarian laws and police repression, and confronting the fascists wherever they rear their heads. And like I've said before, we will fight the fascists at the ballot box, but when necessary, we will fight them in the streets as well. And I also want to address some things that I think we need to change in our party already. I don't think it's right that you can't be a member of another party while joining the party, because our job is to unite the left. We have an historic opportunity to bring all the left together. I disagree with that. I also think the fact that you can only be a member if you have the right to reside here and the right to vote is anti-migrant solidarity. We need to practice our politics, and if you live here, you should be able to get involved in all aspects of our party democracy. I think if you live abroad, and many people have approached me and Jeremy about this, you should be able to get involved in an international section of the party. That isn't a hard thing, that is very easy, and we should have that policy in place. and you shouldn't have to be 16 to get involved. I've been inspired by all the young people I've seen today. That policy should also be low to 14 like other parties. We don't need to be less democratic than other parties. And while this conference is being arranged through Sortition, which many people have been criticising, and I share some of those criticisms, future conferences must have all member meetings in local branches that elect delegates, because that is democratic. We must have an executive committee that is elected through OMOV, that holds the party's leadership to account. That executive committee must be the one that has a hiring panel taken out of it, because we do not give jobs to mates. We have to look at the trade union movement when it comes to hiring processes, and that is the democratic way of doing it. And so there are a lot of things that we still need to fine-tune. And I need you all to be part of this process, because we want maximum member democracy. Ultimately, the stakes simply couldn't be higher. The planet is on fire, inequality is deepening, fascism is growling at the door. We unite now, or else we're going to lose. And that is a terrifying concept. When the choice is between socialism and barbarism, there is no middle ground. We choose socialism every single time, and we have to shout that from the rooftops. There is only one path left for us, and that is to fight, and we fight to win. Thank you so much. It's your party, and that is what I've always wanted right from the very start. And perhaps my life would have been much easier if I kept my mouth shut, but member democracy means a lot to me, and I will always fight for that. I'm just going to touch on that since we're starting on the communication, and obviously there have been teething issues, putting that lightly. The data is in process of being migrated from the first membership portal, and all of your financial membership data is safe and secure. It always went to their very same bank account. And I know that there was some mischaracterization that took place, and I had to obviously defend myself in that, because my priority has always been members and member democracy. Going forward, I hope comms will be better. Like Mike said, you were able to eventually get an email out today. I don't have any access to that mailing list. I see documents and emails just like everyone else. While I co-founded the founding of the party, conference has not been something I have been involved with. Hence, I am speaking up when there are issues. I think it's really important that we are unified and we are working together to build the strongest possible party. But like I said, member democracy is my MO, it's my modus operandi, and that's what I will keep focusing on. We know that the media is our class enemy, and they will throw everything at us, including calling for me to be deported. And I think we have to understand that we are building something that the establishment will throw everything in the kitchen sink at, and we have to build the resilience to defend ourselves and the party that we are building. When I was in France a few weeks ago, French comrades, Belgian comrades, Italian comrades were so grateful that we finally, on the British left, have a party of our own. And they've been asking the left in the UK to do this for a very long time. And now that we have it, there is no going back. We must build, we must put our efforts and our energies to building a truly democratic, member-led party that is not controlled by a handful of people, especially MPs at the very top. It is your party. That has to be very important. I want to just touch on the questions around women's rights, trans rights, and migrants' rights. I hope that you will look at my track record and know that I take these issues of liberation very, very seriously. When it comes to workers' rights, I've never crossed the picket line. I believe an MP's position is supporting workers on the picket line, and I always will. When it comes to candidate selection, our candidates have to be accountable to our members, and they have to be accountable to the motions that are passed at conference. If there is a democratic deficit, that is incredibly dangerous. Not dangerous, but unacceptable. We are basically, as democratic as the Green Party, which I've just said, has the democratic deficit. Conference has to be sovereign, democratic, and its motions have to be binding. And so if, for example, councillors and MPs are not upholding what is passed at conference, we have to look at the right to recall, and obviously mandatory reselection has to be there, because you are not an MP for yourself, you are a voice of the movement, and that's incredibly important. When it comes to education, so it's highly politicised by the fight for free education. For me, and I'm sure everyone in this room, education is a public good. It is not a commodity that you can buy and sell, and so we must have a fully funded education model, which involves maintenance grants. It involves abolishing fees for good. It means having a democratically run system where student and staff welfare and well-being is respected and prioritised. So that is what I believe your party must be fighting for. But we can't create policy out of thin air. We have to vote for it and push for it, and that's the role that you guys all have as members. And the mailing list of your party should have been used to mobilise people to turn up to that demo to counter the fascists. And we know what we see in society has been emboldened by politicians and the media who scapegoat Muslims, minorities every single day. And so we need an anti-fascist league of the 21st century, and your party has to be building that with trade unions, root and branch, to fight back. And that just can't be logos and leaflets, it has to mean material support. So that's my answer to that question. We have to fight fascism wherever it rears its ugly head, and that's both electorally and in the streets. On the question around Zionism, there are Christian Zionists, there are atheist Zionists, and there are Jewish anti-Zionists who support us in this struggle. I am a proud anti-Zionist. Zionism is an ideological position that is about racial supremacy, and that's why I've called for a single state, because the two-state solution is dead. It is a fallacy. It's a singular secular state with equal rights for all, and that involves the right of return and all obligations under international law. On elections and the Greens, well, 800,000 people first expressed an interest in your party. Those 800,000 people have not gone away. Many are cautiously watching. And so we have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust, but also recruit members. The recent MRP poll that went out had, despite the turbulence that has happened over the past few weeks, your party winning 13 seats. That is still double the Greens. So when people say, hey, just take a back seat, absolutely not, especially when the Greens do not want to sever diplomatic relations with a genocidal apartheid state, where they are supporting NATO and not immediate withdrawal, which is our position, must be our position. We also recognise there is a democratic deficit in the Greens where conference is not binding. And I ask, what's the point if we all go to Bournemouth or Liverpool or Birmingham, clap our hands at some speeches, pass motions, but your MPs can do absolutely whatever they like? That is not democratic. And then in local government, we know that there have been Green councillors who have voted through cuts, privatising assets. They have voted against housing developments as well. Our councillors cannot do that. And if they do, there have to be consequences. We do not support austerity, we do not support privatisation, and we support building council homes. And finally, there was another point about councils. Councils across the country, including in Coventry, have seen half of their budgets cut, and we know that that has not been restored under a Labour government. It is the shunned child of government spending, and your party councillors elected through open selection must be people who do not vote through cuts but fight cuts and recognise that that is their job to do, not to administer austerity. And then I'll touch on the candidate question before I come to socialism. Mandatory reselection allows members to have the power of choosing who their representatives are, both in local government and MPs. And you know, I've been really proud to work with colleagues like Ian Byrne, who has championed the Hillsborough law, who was a taxi driver before he became an MP, and has community organised. There are so many people in our communities that are leaders. They are organising food banks, they are supporting schools and teachers and parents, they are making sure no kid goes hungry at night, they are providing uniforms. Those are the people that we want to engage with what we're building. They know the issues of their community and they can represent them really well, and there's so many people in this room who can do a much better job than many people who are MPs, and I strongly encourage you to get involved. And then finally, on socialism, I mean what I say when I say worker control. Workers creating the wealth, your nurses, teachers, drivers, deciding how that wealth is used instead of a handful of billionaires and corporations. It means the means of production, we mean factories, banks, the energy system, industries being democratically owned and run rather than controlled by private profit. And right now those decisions are obviously being made in boardrooms by people who are only accountable to shareholders. Socialism means that those decisions are made by society as a whole in the interests of many. So when I say democratizing the economy, it's not just voting every 5 years while the billionaires run the show in between. It means workers having a say in their workplaces, in their communities, controlling local services. It means public ownership, not just as an arm of state bureaucracy, but real democratic participation. And so practically, what I'm talking about is public services run for need, not profit, energy, water, transport in public hands with users and workers on the boards. It means cooperatives where workers control their workplaces, and a financial system that directs investment into housing, into green jobs and healthcare, rather than speculation on the arms industry. So put simply, it's democracy in every aspect of our life, not just Parliament, but the economy too. We need to have branches that have at least 50% of membership subs, so they can run local campaigns, they have the resources to even perhaps hire an organiser and work across a borough or a wider constituency, where they are able to run political education programmes and essentially build social power by winning campaigns. It's a community organising model that I was working with when I worked for the Labour Party under Jeremy's community organising unit, where we worked in Brexit, Leave areas, in Halezone, Stourbridge and Wolverhampton, where you identify through listening, mass listening exercises, you identify what the local issues are and then you build campaigns. In Wolverhampton, it was stopping a local GP surgery from closing in an area that was quite affluent and people didn't really engage in politics. But you bring people together because they want to fight to save their local GP surgery, and then they realise the true social power that they hold. And winning is infectious. You want to build, more people get involved, and that is something that I think your party has to have at the heart of it. Otherwise, you are just an electoral vehicle, and if you're just knocking on doors during an election, people aren't interested because they see that as self-serving. In the Labour Party, local branches only got 13 pence of every pound. We are not here to create another Labour Party, and I think that is at the heart of it, having the resources and having the autonomy to be able to do your own thing without control freakery at the very top. On the question to do with NATO, Trump has forced Western governments to increase their military defence spending at the same time we're being told you cannot fund the NHS, you cannot have mass council homes being built, you cannot have workers' wages increasing. And that defence spending, we are saying, must be divested and diverted into homes, into schools, into healthcare, into addressing the climate catastrophe. When we talk to people and we say, do you agree with money being invested in missiles, tanks and bombs, or would you rather have free and fast buses that are reliable? I think I know the answer to that question, and if we can talk to people about where this money is going and how that will create a more unsafe world where we have more endless wars, people aren't interested in that. They want us to focus on making their lives better and addressing their material realities, and we know what those material realities are. It's poor housing, it's insecure work, it's NHS on its knees. How can we justify billions of taxpayers' money going into defence, going into NATO, when we have millions of kids living in poverty in the 6th richest country in the world? How can we accept that? How can we accept homelessness as a normal feature? How can we accept more food banks than McDonald's restaurants? And we shouldn't, and we have to fight back. And yes, it will be hard because the same attacks will come from the right-wing press that this is the left that isn't serious about national security. I think it's about priorities. When we face a world where future crises will be about climate, will be about pandemics and so forth. And so when it comes to media strategy, I've been quite clear, you cannot give these people an inch. They are our class enemies. They are owned by billionaires who have spent decades drip feeding hate and division, Islamophobia and transphobia. And so when it comes to how we relate to mainstream media, we engage with them on our terms. We talk to them when we need to talk to them. We invest in local media, local people telling their own stories. And yes, social media plays a part, but you cannot trust billionaire algorithms to work with us in our interests. And that's why there is no shortcut to door knocking and having conversations, persuasive conversations, as community organisers would say, and that has to be done on a massive scale. I'm saying millions of doors being knocked. And if we want to think about inspiration, look at New York, where Zohran Mamdani is going to be the mayor of New York City, when he has faced opposition from billionaires, the Trump administration, political dynasties. And what has he done? He's united the working class around an agenda around free and fast buses, universal childcare, lowering the rent, and having community-owned grocery shops. He is focusing on people's material conditions, and that's how we can do it if we are committed to a vision of transforming this country forever. Finally, on infiltrations, well, one of the things that I focused on in Parliament is spy cops, and how we saw the climate movement and various leftist causes, including the Stephen Lawrence family, being infiltrated by the state to undermine their causes. We should not underestimate the levels of infiltration, undermining, attacks we will face. There is no other way, I believe, to combat that other than building a strong social base where hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, are involved in building this party, where it is not a hierarchical endeavour. The power truly lies with members. So even if an MP retires, like I said earlier, even if they lose their job in an election, the party is powerful and can sustain itself and replace its leadership. Otherwise, it is just like every other party.